Hello everyone, my name is the Mad Scorpion and welcome to the reset update for the week of February the 18th. Now getting into it, obviously with the man standing behind me, the Iron Banner is once again going. I'll go over more in terms of the mode and everything in the Crucible section, but aside from that, there is Iron Banner allegedly for only the next week. That is what my loadout is telling me, only 1 week, not the usual 2 that has been the last couple of seasons. However, there is also a bug going around where once you finish the match and leave like normal, that you are given quitter penalties even though you didn't quit early. Bungie is aware of this. They already made a note on the Bungie help. They are investigating and hopefully will have a fix soon, so just trust and hold out in that. Aside from that, with Iron Banner, there is a Crucible rank booster to go alongside it in case you wish to grind out the boosted Crucibles, and with that, there is a few other details going on, including the Sunder Doctrine contest mode redo. If you don't know, PlayStation, basically their network completely fizzed out and they had zero access to online capabilities. Because of that, it interfered with their access to the contest mode Sunder Doctrine. Because of that, Bungie has actually relinquished some control and given us an additional contest mode weekend, even if you weren't a part of PlayStation. So with that, in case you missed out in the initial week, be sure to take part in it on the follow-up in case you wish to, grind out and possibly get yourself access to the contest mode emblems and maybe even the free drop of the Finality Inclusion. I forget what it's called, but the exotic drop from this dungeon. Aside from that, there is also the launch of Grandmasters that'll be happening next Tuesdays on the 25th. Which I don't know if the Grandmaster node is going to be initially available for all of those who have already guilded, but in case you want to start working on Conqueror, want to work on guilding Conqueror, or grind out some Adepts, this is the available time to do so. Aside from that, let's get into the main week at large. Starting at the usual spot of the Nightfall, we have for this week the PsyOps Battlegrounds Cosmodrome, which while it's not Grandmaster available and only Master, it is still a bit of a pain in the butt to get through, mainly because this is flooded with Lucent Hive after the very start. You start with a basic escort delivering a payload that eventually deals with Hive and Lucent Hive, and then you're dealing with them pretty much for the rest of the strike, which ends in an open PsyOps field, which you do have to deal with the aspects of Savathûn, which once you get to Grandmaster level are incredibly threatening, and at the same time you're going to be dealing with a boss that is a Void Titan Knight, which of course has the wonderful geometry of random bounces that at GM level will instantly kill you. But at the same time, it is one that I think that with experience and enough tries, you will be more than able to get through it, especially before you get to Grandmaster level. However, when you actually consider the weapon, I'm not sure if it's worth farming if you're looking for the Adept version specifically with this strike, because it is the Shadow Price, which I want to officially like the Shadow Price. It is a solid rifle, it is classic D1 model, but at the same time, this is from 2 seasons ago in terms of its design and rolls, so it is lacking of some of the best arc perks nowadays. Yes, it has access to Volt Shot, One for All, Overflow, a few fair number of good perks, but for specifically an arc weapon, it is missing both conductive feedback from last season and things like Rolling Thunder or Rolling Storm, I forget what it's called, but from this active season. So in terms of the current arc setup, it may not be the best, but it isn't bad as an auto rifle, especially if you're looking for it in the Crucible side. But then again, the vertical frame auto rifles, as far as I know, they were still a bit lacking in terms of the Crucible field. But with that, let's go ahead and get into the rest of the world. After Nightfalls, checking with the Crucible side of things, as usual, there is Iron Banner and once again boosted Crucible rank, so if you wish to rank up Shaxx a little bit faster this week, this is totally the opportunity to do so. However, with Iron Banner, it says there's only 1 week, but there is actually 2 modes going on with Iron Banner Control and Iron Banner Eruption. Control being the basic version of Domination, capture the points, that once you get all 3, you have bonus point rounds that are locked out. And with Eruption, think of it as keep killing, and if you don't keep killing in the kill streak, eventually you just kind of explode, which is a bit of a weird Clash version. But aside from that, in terms of our normal standard Crucible, once again with no trials this weekend because of Iron Banner, there is no additional Crucible labs. However, there is the basic competitive elimination and the basic free-for-all of Rumble, which is the only things unless you wish to not play Iron Banner. Getting into the weekly featured rotators, starting off with the exotic mission, it is the Nord Avalon mission, which if you don't know is basically where you get the Vexcalibur glaive from, which I would wholly recommend if you're struggling to survive in some cases where you would die in a normal glaive scenario. Its shield provides overshield as well as being pretty nifty in the ways of getting additional overshield plus being a scattershot projectile in case you are missing the single shot projectiles. Aside from that, in addition to the Nord Avalon rewarding the Vexcalibur glaive exotic, there is also the variety of Season of Defiance weapons you can earn in addition, which is basically in case you missed out on that season and need to get red borders for crafting, this is where you'd source some of those weapons. There's a fair number of good ones. I know I was a fan of the auto rifle that came through, and there is many other weapons that I'm sure somebody would say is the best weapon ever, but in the end, it is entirely up to you if you feel like grinding out those weapons for yourself. However, next in terms of raids, we have two that are good for farming in terms of red borders, the Root of Nightmares and Deepstone Crypt. In two ways, they both have deep side weapons you can hunt for, and they both have random drop exotics that you can also hunt for in case you wish to farm out the challenge modes. However, the Root of Nightmares is the only one that has a master mode, and you can earn adept weapons from, as the Deepstone Crypt was introduced before master mode raids. So with that, there is just the basic mode to go for, and no focused armor from either or. But with the Root of Nightmares, you do have enhanced mobility stats in case you farm out the master mode, or are seeking just adepts and just want some extra armor for that. In terms of dungeons, we have two that are kind of weird variety of worth farming, because the Warlords Ruin is definitely a decent dungeon in terms of farming out. In terms of accessing Artifice Armor, I wouldn't say it's a harder one. It might be a little bit easier than most of the other ones, but you gotta have somebody who knows what they're doing on your team. In retrospect, the Prophecy Dungeon is pretty farmable, and there is some nifty rewards you can get in terms of just pure weaponry. However, in terms of Prophecy, there is no random drop exotic, and in terms of Warlords, there is. And the Catalyst is also sourced from the Master Mode that is only available during this time. So I would definitely recommend doing a once through of Warlords if you haven't just yet, because it is of course limited time access to the Master Mode this week. Now, moving on from that, there is basically the usual raid challenges. Crota's End is still bugged and not rewarding a challenge mode even if it's, it's time. However, with Salvation's Edge, we have the Coordinated Efforts Challenge. The Root of Nightmares is currently featured, so it is all challenges active, infinitely farmable. King's Fall is Devious Thievery. Vow of the Disciple is Swift Destruction. Vault of Glass is Out of Its Way, aka Templar Challenge. The Deepstone Crypt, once again being featured, is infinitely farmable, all available at once. Garden of Salvation is the Leftovers Challenge, and the Last Wish is Witch Witch. With that, wrapping it all up, there is the Dares of Eternity Expert Mode, Endgame, which is Vex, Cabal, and Crota. But just as a note, in case you actually cared, would anyone actually care if I keep mentioning the Dares of Eternity Expert Mode? Because I cover it just because it's something worth noting. There are still people that are grinding out Forerunner and the Magic Space Rock. But I generally am starting to think it's not worth covering. I know it's only like 5 seconds, but if you would rather just me leave it out, just please let me know in the comments down below. Getting into our challenges for the week in terms of seasonal challenges, of course, there is Complete Act 1 Part 3. Basically, just do the weekly story for Act 1, which I believe this is the last one, which will probably go into Act 2 next week if they are, telling the truth on the fact that they are working in a new release format with the axe. However, next is the Heretical Arsenal for defeating combatants with grenade launcher final blows, bonus progress in heresy activities, aka the Nether, or by defeating guardians anywhere else. Next is the Dreadnought Secrets, which is completing secrets around the Nether. Some of it, I imagine, is going to be simple. Maybe you can do it all in one run, but in case you only know one secret, I imagine you could just do the same thing 3 different times on reruns. It does reward XP and the Curios of the 9, which I believe are still a secret yet to be revealed. Just good to hold on to them just in case, because supposedly they sound like they're going to be something nifty. Next is the Shock Density, which is defeating combatants with arc or void damage, specifically in the Nether. Own bonus progress when empowered by one of the following boons, which is Herald of the Sky, Paracausal Siphon, or Finishing Void. Next is Violent Pulsations, which is basically just killing things with pulse rifles. Bonus progress in the Nether, as always. Nether Expertise for completing the Nether on Expert or Advanced difficulty. The Principal Performance for defeating enemies with primary ammo in any ritual activity, aka Crucible, Gambit, or Strikes. And lastly, Iron Sharpens Iron, which is completing Iron Banner matches, bonus progress for wins, which is one of those things that can only be done, obviously, when Iron Banner is active. So if you want to cover your bases and get all of these challenges done, make sure to do this as soon as possible, because you might just miss out otherwise. Speaking of the Heretical Arsenal right here, this is one of those ones that rewards a special Masterwork version with an additional Origin trait, which I believe is the Kingsfall one. Just keep track of that in case you're looking for some nifty rolls of the Psychopomp. And as always, wrapping up with some of the good stuff, we have our weekly cosmetics at the Eververse store for Bright Dust. Now, on the front page, we do have one of those ones that is a weird look, where it's kind of a weird texture, and it kind of hurts the eyes if you can stand, the reflection. but there's a Radiant Carite. I'm still not sure how to say that. It looks actually kind of cool when I look at the new Heresy weapons, but in terms of armor, it kind of gives a real headache, so it might be better for weapons just in the plain view. And the next is the Masonry shader from last season, which it says it is a live shader, but correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see any live effects or animations, but it is a solid black and gold look nonetheless. Next is the Golden Age Booster, which is basically a ship from Revenant that it looks retro future, but also it's just kind of a ship that is a nifty look, but I don't know if anyone would really want this one per se. Maybe if they're going for a theme, but I'm not sure otherwise. And next we have the Grasping Thoughts, which is from Season of the Arrivals, which I believe this is supposed to represent the story, and Eris Morn dealing with, the darkness whispering to her through a tree. But aside from that, there is a note on the front page that is another one of those seasonal bundles. In case you wanted specific shaders, just to give you an idea, if you want any of these individual items, you can go ahead and buy them individually, but if you specifically want the shader out of this bundle, just in case you don't know, a lot of these times there is a bundle that a exclusive shader will only be accessible through buying the bundle itself. So don't buy all 3 of the individual items looking for the shader, just go ahead and get the bundle. It's typically cheaper anyways. Just a quick PSA for those of you just joining us. Into the main Bright Dust store for shaders and transmats, we have Verdigris from Season of the Drifter, which I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a, commercial for mouthwash, but that's kind of what I get with its color scheme. Basically just mouthwash and mint. Next is the Atmospheric Glow, which technically doesn't glow nearly at all. The only bit that kind of glows is a slight patch of green right there, but it is basically just a really dense dark green that it would be a night sky if it was blue. Next is the Cursed Azure, for Azure, however you say it, from Season of the Plunder, which is just kind of one of those looks. It's silver, goldish, some blue. I think it looked a little bit better on weapons more so, but it doesn't look half bad when it comes to armor. And lastly, the Sinking Feeling, which is one of those ones that came out and everyone was super hyped for, but I rarely see nowadays, which is essentially a lightning shader. You have dark blues, a weird cyan blue, with, in some sections of armors and weapons, you can see lightning storms happening. I can see it sparking right here on the shoulder pad a little bit, with some looming clouds in the dark blue. An animated shader for sure, but I definitely see a drop in popularity nowadays. And for transmats, we have the Warsat Arrival from Season 10, which is, of course, you popping out of a Rasputin Warsat. The Harpy Entrance from Season of the Splicer, which is you popping out of a Gorgon, not a Harpy. And the Aura Re-Entrance from Season of, Echoes, Episode of Echoes, which is basically just kind of that. It looks a little bit low quality, oddly enough. And we have for emotes, one of the big ticket items on Season of Undying's the Guitar Solo, one of my favorite emotes if you've seen my outros, but, a solid one nonetheless, no sound though. The Tiny Friend emote, which is basically you making friends with a little tiny lucent moth. So, it's actually appropriate here. The moths aren't so bad when they aren't exploding, but, you don't get to keep it, you have to let it fly away. Next is the Tex Mechanica shell from Season of Dawn, which is basically if you want your ghost to look oddly high detail, even though it's just kind of a brick. Aside from that, it is a very neat looking ghost. I'm not the fan of just the weird case. Next is the Wanderer's Wings from Season of the Lost, which is just kind of another ship. There is no real theme to it. It does say Wanderer's Wings, inciting that it's an exploration vessel. Could have been a nod to No Man's Sky, but at the same time, it looks like a ship. There is no real way to say it. The Aoki Foss Mark 7, which is basically a kind of speeder set. This was supposed to look like a how do I say it, F1 racer set, but it looks fast, but in the end is just as fast as every other Sparrow, so why look fast if you aren't fast? Next is the Solid State, which is an ornament for the Quicksilver Storm, which I do like the idea, but personally I am a little bit bored of ornaments that only change the color scheme and don't do anything to actually change the gun. The shader, the ornament that I think came out with Lightfall, gave a nice cover that went across the entire back and actually changed how it looked slightly other than just the color. Just changing colors isn't exactly an ornament. I'd rather actually have adjustment to the model personally. But aside from that, next and last is the Plague Projection from last season in case you want to rep the SCP-049 setup that was last season's armor. And with that, that is the end of the reset update. Once again, Iron Banner is around, but only for the next week. Grandmasters will be launching next week. If you want to get access to the contest mode Sunder Doctrine rewards, that is also this weekend, so be sure to keep tuned for that. Aside from all of that, my name is the Mad Scorpion. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.